Can't wait for things to set up here and I'll get started. Hopefully this will go well. I'm going to do a demonstration. Basically, I'm going to show you the last part of my process, and this is going to be the part I'm going to demonstrate live in South Carolina in Lake City. I'll hear about the venue later. But I'm going to take the panel that I've cut all the paper for. I'm transferring the ink off these magazine pages, and that ink is face down on the beeswax that I want to transfer. So I've already taken a wooden block, which is this guy, and I've burnished the ink into the beeswax. The next step is to take some 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to take the gloss off the paper, just lightly sand it. Once that's off, I'll spray it with water, and since the gloss is gone, it'll absorb that water, and I'll be able to rub the paper off and reveal the color underneath. And this is one panel of 16. These are 18-inch panels. There'll be 16 of these in a grid formation, which will make up a piece roughly 75 inches square. So it's pretty big, almost 7 feet, 6.5 feet. So yeah, I'm gonna turn the camera down so you can watch me sand. Not very fun to watch, but it's part of the process. And if you have any questions, I'm gonna try to keep an eye on the comments, so maybe I can read it from here. If not, I'll walk over there and read it and come back and answer. So if you're watching, thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoy watching this. Hopefully this video is better than my last one, and God, I hope the sound's working. That's the main thing. So here we go. As I'm sanding, I gotta keep moving my paper around. It gets clogged up with the paper dust, and sometimes I get on edge and I get beeswax on it. Kind of keeps it from sanding very well. You know, the better I knock that shine off the magazine paper, the better and easier it is for me to get the paper off. But at the same time, if I sand too much, I risk going through the paper and getting to the beeswax, which would interrupt my transfer process. So there's a fine touch to how much pressure to put. Don't want to overdo it, but don't do it enough. And the transfers that I do are not perfect. That's kind of what makes them cool. They'll have pits and little dips and stuff where the transfer doesn't work. That's okay, especially on a large piece like this. I'll notice it when I take the paper off, but once you stand back and look at the painting, you rarely notice those imperfections. And there's enough of them too that it kind of flows well with the art piece, and especially on the subject matter I use. Kind of like it. This is going to have a nostalgic advertising feel to it, like an old ad that's been sitting around and gotten dirty over the years. I think part of that look I get is from the beeswax itself. That amber hue it has shows through the transfer of the ink, because the ink that I transfer it's really translucent. You can see through it. If I have a grainy piece of wood and I do a layer of beeswax and then do the transfer, you can see the grain of the wood behind it. and in some cases that's really neat. Now that I'm using most of these birch panels, they don't have a lot of grain showing, so don't see it as often. Before I was using birch panels, I would buy at Lowe's or Home Depot. They weren't quite as solid of a color, or as without blemish. I'm sorry, the ones I buy now are without blemish. The ones at Home Depot and Lowe's had knots and grain showing in them. They wasn't necessarily made for doing what I do. But I will say there are a couple pieces that the grain and the knots added a whole lot to the painting itself. Whew. Once that sandpaper wears out a little bit, you want to switch it out some. I'm going to jump over here, and hopefully you can hear me saying this. I want to check and see that the sound is working. It seems to be. I'm going to assume it is working. So we'll keep going. If it's not working on this one, I may have to figure out what's going on. Do a little more research online. As you can tell, I'm not very good at this. It's all new to me. Shows I have somebody watching. I don't know if that's accurate or not. It could be that I have it up and watching it. If you're watching and you can hear me talking, could you just throw a comment on there real fast? You can just say hi. I just want to know that the sound's working. And after this is all sanded, I promise it gets more exciting. If you haven't watched my videos before, removing the paper and revealing that ink, it's pretty cool. I like it. And I've done this for 8 or 9 years now and still get excited about it. We're getting there. Switch. Plan was to wait and do this and do all of them actually on site in South Carolina, but since I haven't done a painting this large and I'm not sure what to expect, I've decided to go ahead and do one now so I can make sure everything works right. That way when I get down there, I won't be too surprised. I think the overall piece will be surprising, but I don't want no issues right when I'm on site. It's enough pressure doing it live on YouTube and not knowing what to expect. Looking like we're about there. As you can notice, there's a little glare, but it's not much. There's still enough of that sheen knocked off where I think I'm going to be fine. So what I'll do now is take a damp cloth and just kind of clean up some of this dust. You can see it. I like to get the worst of it up before I start rubbing the paper off. There we go. Yeah, so there. You can see it's been sanded. And we have a paper that will absorb the water now. When I spray it, you'll see the colors kind of come through from the underside of the paper, which is kind of cool to watch. I'll spray it on here, then I'll let it sit for just a minute. And I'll take my hand and kind of rub the water around on top of the paper. Moving it, making sure everything gets a good dose. And as I'm rubbing the paper off, I'll have to continue to keep it wet, so I'll spray it again every once in a while. The title of my piece, of course I put it in the YouTube video comments, is Clown Off the Clock. And as we get closer, I'll post my artist statement about that. There we go. Yeah, we're getting ready to rub it off. And the areas where you see the yellows, that's, of course, white ink doesn't transfer. What I do is I use a really light grays and beiges, and you'll still see text and things transfer. But of course the background where the white is there's no ink, is basically what that means. So where this clown's face is white, it's going to have an amber tint from the beeswax. That's basically what you're seeing. It's funny, I've done eyeballs several times as studies. I've done my own eyeball a lot in really small square blocks, and I did them just to test and to figure out where I needed to focus on details. I don't know how many I've done yet. I need to go back and look at that, but every time I've done them just to show people that, you know, I can do this. It's pretty cool looking, and I sell them. So I went to, yeah, every show I've taken them to just to show them off, I've sold the pieces, so that's pretty cool. And what you're going to see today is just me rubbing the paper off. I may do another video tomorrow or here soon that will show me cutting in some details. And what I mean by cutting in details is I take tools, just sharp instruments, and I basically carve into this beeswax, and I remove some of that ink that I've transferred to make highlights. Because the more I take away of that beeswax and the ink that I've transferred, the lighter the background's going to be. And occasionally I need a really light area, like in the eyeball, for instance. I'll take and to get that glare you have on an eyeball, usually I'll take a little bit of chunk of beeswax out, and that way it'll look like it's got a sparkle, or a, you know what I mean, a twinkle. And of course, like eyelashes, I'll draw in those eyelashes by removing ink. I call it drawing because it's what it feels like I'm doing. I'm just taking a sharp instrument and I'm using that tool as a subtracting, but it's adding details. And it's funny, after I remove this paper, there's still a residue of pulp that will stay on there until I really polish it up. So you can see as I'm working on it, it keeps getting cloudy. And that's what that is as that resin, as the pulp dries, it gets cloudy again and hazy on top of that ink. What I'll do is take this cotton cloth and wet it really good and basically buff that pulp off of the ink transfer. Getting dry over here. Yeah, when it's wet, that pulp kind of disappears. And you can tell, well, maybe in video it's a little hard. I'll put it up a little closer to the camera, so hopefully you can see the imperfections from the transfer on top of that organic layer of beeswax. Like I said, where there's pits and gouges, there's not going to be a transfer. It's just going to be a void. Alright, I think I got the paper off. Let's spray it really good. Now let's buff it. Sometimes I have to do this 2 or 3 times to get it all off. I'll do this and I'll let it dry up a little bit, and I'll probably see some more areas. And then I'll take a heat gun, and with the heat gun I'll warm it up to enough to where that ink that's sitting on top of the beeswax right now will fuse into the beeswax. So you won't just see the color on top. It'll bond the two together a little bit more permanent. You can still scrape it, of course, because it's beeswax, but it'll be protected with a resin coating. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed watching. There's a close-up view, and I'll be back, like I said, to show some other parts of the process. Thanks for watching. I hope you get to hear everything and enjoyed watching. We'll see you next time. Thank you.